So this is how to draw 733 in Onshape. We're going to use multiple extrusions from the same sketch as a new technique. So we're going to first start by drawing our top rectangle. And we see it's 2.5 wide by 4.5 long. And then on that same rectangle, it has another rectangle on the corner that's 5/8 wide, and then two squares on the opposite right side that are both 5/8 by 5/8. So let's go into into Onshape. We're going to put our sketch on the top plane. Right click on top plane, new sketch. Let's view it from the top plane and turn my other planes off. So like I said, we'll start with our rectangle tool. So far we've learned two different ways to dimension. We can dimension something by clicking on the dimension tool, clicking the line and dragging out, and then I can make this 2.5 or 2 1/2. Again, I can enter a fraction by saying whole number plus fraction. 2 1/2, enter. Pan over a little bit. So instead of doing a line dimension, I can also do an edge-to-edge dimension. So I can click one edge and then click the opposing edge to get a horizontal dimension. And again, this would be 4 1/2. The benefit of using an edge-to-edge dimension versus a line dimension is on a line dimension, if I make edits to this line, I lose the dimension. So for example, if I were to trim out a piece of this line, I would lose this dimension. If I deleted the line, I lose all my dimensions because I referenced this line and that line to do this one down here. Let me Control Z. Whereas this dimension here was referencing the edges and not the line itself. So if I were to trim or delete the line that it's measuring, it does not affect the dimension itself. So the edge-to-edge dimension technique is a little bit better to use than just a line dimension technique. So we have a rectangle that's 2 1/2 by 4 1/2. We said there was a shelf over here that was 5/8 wide, so I'm just going to draw a rectangle. Snap it into the opposing line, and then we use edge to edge to make it 5/8 wide. 5 divided by 8. And then I can use the rectangle tool to draw the little squares over on this side. I could, if I'm careful, horizontally constrain or vertically constrain the bottom square to the top square by kind of hovering over that point and pulling down. If I don't do that, I can set my squares equal, set both horizontal lines equal, and then click both vertical lines and set those equal. And now my squares are symmetrical because I've set the two constraints equal. Now I'll go back and dimension how wide the square is, and it was 5/8. And how tall the square is. Since they were technically squares, I could have just set the two sides equal as well and only had to do one dimension, but I want you guys to get used to using the edge-to-edge dimension technique as a way to confine your drawings. All right, so I've got the main shape done. Now I need to figure out where the circles go. So if I look back at the drawing, I see I have two circles here, and it says they are 3/4 drill, 2 holes. So I'm going to have 2 holes that go all the way through, and they're 3/4 inch diameter, because if you use a drill bit, it makes it diameter. And I see these circles are 1 5/8 apart. So I'm going to start by drawing the first circle. Then I'm going to roll over the center point and pull away so I can get a horizontal constraint for the center of the second circle. Now that locks them together, so I don't have to go back and add the horizontal constraint later. I want to make them equal. And then I want a dimension. And we said it was 3/4 drill. And then we want to dimension how far apart they were, so I'm going to click the center of the right one, center of the left one, and we'll place it up here. And it was 1 5/8, so 1 plus 5/8. If I want to see what that looks like, I can say tab, and it moves into place, and if I confirm it, I can hit enter. Now I'm going to dimension from the center of the circles back to the back edge, and that's 1 1/4. And the circles start 13/16 away from the shelf that sticks up on the left side. So dimension from the center of the circle to the back edge, and if I drag down, it'll give me the vertical dimension, 1 1/4. Tab to visualize, enter to confirm. And then from center to shelf is 13/16. So that's all I need to dimension and draw for the top view. I know there's other stuff going on in our shape, but I'm going to do that in a different way so you learn new techniques. So now if I look at my shape in 3-dimensional mode, I see that the shelf is 1 7/16 tall. The squares on the sides take up 3/4. And the shelf sticks up 7/16 beyond the base measurement here. Well, if I know that this is 7/16 here, and this is 1 7/16, the height from the bottom to the base is 1, but instead of just typing in 1, I'm going to put in the math so that I'm familiar with how to do that technique in case it's not as easy as 7/16 minus 1 7/16. So let's orbit up and say extrude. And Onshape often tries to figure out what you want to extrude. It selected everything but the circles. If it worked for you, that's fine. If not, you can always click inside the portion you want to extrude to make sure you get the right pieces. And we said that we were going to go 1 7/16. Because that was the height of the shelf. And then we can subtract 7/16 from that. I could have also gone up 1 7/16 for the height of the shelf. I could have gone down and gone up. It doesn't really matter in the direction you go when you're doing your extrusions. The goal is just for you guys to learn how to do different techniques. So I've typed in my equation, I hit tab, and it solves it at 1 inch. But if I click on it, I actually can still see the equation underneath. So I'm going to check OK. So I've got my first extrusion. Now if I want to add other extrusions, I need to turn on the sketch so I can see it. So to do that, I click the eyeball to say show. Now I can see the sketch underneath. And now I'll extrude this rectangle on the left side up, So if I say extrude, notice you can't click that rectangle if you're looking at it from the top view because your shape's on top of the sketch. So what you have to do is orbit to get to the bottom of the rectangle so where you can click the actual sketch. We want to make sure the add option is selected, and we wanted our depth to be 1 7/16. Tab to confirm, and green check to save. Now I can do the same thing for the squares over here, except they go up 3/4 past the surface, and we know the surface was 1, so I can just say 1 3/4. Extrude, turn it over so I can click the shape, square 1, square 2, pan down a little bit. Now I can drag that up a little higher to see what it's going to look like, and I want to type in 1 3/4. Tab, and click OK to save. So that's most of our shape. We've got the shelf on the left side and the 2 towers on the right with the circles in the middle. The only part we're missing is this little cutout underneath the bottom side. There's multiple ways to draw this cutout, but I'm choosing to draw it this way so that you get used to using this extrude cut method that we may see later. And I see that the cutout is 3/8 from the bottom edge and 2 1/4 from the right side. So I'm going to draw that same rectangle on my front view. So right click on the front view, new sketch, I'm going to view it from that front view, and now I'm just going to draw a rectangle that represents that little part that's going to be cut out. Just make sure you don't accidentally snap to, say, the midpoint of the bottom line, because then that would be inaccurate. Or say the midpoint of the side line. Draw my rectangle, dimension from the bottom of my shape to the bottom of the rectangle, and that was 3/8. And the right side of the shape to the right side of the rectangle, and that was 2 1/4. So when I dimensioned it, it kicked the rectangle over because I didn't make the rectangle very big. But luckily, these are still under constrained, so I can drag this other side of the rectangle wherever I want. I want to make sure the rectangle encompasses the area below my shape and more. It really doesn't matter how much more, because there's nothing out there that we'll remove. Alright, so now I've got my rectangle locked into place. I'm going to say extrude, and this time click remove. If I orbit, I can see what it's removing. So if I drag the arrow, I can see it removes just to a certain depth. I want the depth to go all the way through, so I'll go ahead and drag it all the way through the part. It doesn't really matter as long as it's beyond the distance of the width of the part. You could also say through all, and then it's going to remove everything behind the rectangle that's attached to this shape. Sometimes you have to be careful using through all, because you can remove any material that's behind that shape, even if it belongs to a different sketch part. We click OK to confirm, and we have our part. So I'm going to turn the part isometric, turn on my sketch dimensions number 1. Don't worry about sketch 2. Show dimensions, and now I can screenshot this to put it in my notebook to be submitted after I share it with the instructor, and copy the share link into my notebook as well.